it going? Yeah, my name's Adrian Melville. I'm an EMBA Global class of 2017. I'm talking about basically chasing a dream. About 18 months after I graduated from undergrad, I ended up playing in Brazil for a season for a club called Santo André. Santo André is a town, it's like a suburb, I think in the southeast section of Sao Paulo. They had a really good team down there. And so this was my kind of experience going down there and trying to play. So just a little bit about my background. So a few early influences for me growing up. One was George Best. Not sure if people know him, but very famous player back in the 60s. Speed, power, could dribble, fantastic player. Another great player, Ruud Gullit from AC Milan. Played around the late 1980s, around when I was growing up. Big influence on me back when AC Milan was definitely one of the best teams in the world. Now not so much. But and finally, last but not least, my older brother. So I always think about this. Has anyone here read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, that book? So in that book, he talks a lot about influences and how cultural influences can kind of shape you. And I know one of the examples he mentions is Bill Gates, and the fact that in that area where Bill Gates grew up, the whole idea of computers was becoming big. And I think even in his high school, he had his school was maybe the only school that had one of the first computers, and how that influence really shaped Bill Gates and allowed him to kind of have a leg up going forward. So my brother was that kind of influence. He was somebody who loved soccer or football. I'll say soccer for the purpose of this. But he loved soccer growing up more than anyone, and was the person who would send away for tapes of George Best, and we would watch AC Milan on the Italian channel on Saturday mornings when nobody basically in our neighborhood was ever doing anything like that. So he was a huge influence for me, and somebody who was able to kind of create the passion that I had for the game. So a little bit on my childhood influences. So I think a really important part of my story is that when I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, soccer was not big in the United States at all. And it really wasn't until the World Cup came in 1994 that things started to change a little bit, and people were starting to get into the game and starting to learn more about it. So around that World Cup actually was one that Brazil won, and after that the momentum started for basically learning about Brazil and different types of the game and how the game was played. So this is a pretty famous commercial that came out right around my high school years, and hopefully this works. But Oh, perfect. Cool. Thank you so much, man. So yeah, that commercial was very popular, and obviously when you get a big American marketing company like Nike behind this, it really starts to add influence to everything that's going on and the whole movement of beginning to enjoy soccer in the United States. So 94 to 2002, this is around when I was in middle school, high school, and Brazil was just dominant. Out of the 3 World Cup cycles, they won 2 of them. They came in they lost in the finals in 1 of them. Bunch of world players of the year, including Ronaldo, who was really my hero growing up, and he was obviously the dominant player, winning the Player of the Year 3 times in that span. So a little bit about my playing career growing up. So I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. That lovely teal jersey was my team growing up. After high school, I ended up playing soccer at Princeton University, where I played all 4 years and had a pretty solid career playing. And after college, I spent my first year playing with the New England Revolution in MLS. So that was, I think, about the 5th or 6th year of MLS. And so really great experience, great people. We ended up going to the MLS finals that year, and a really good season. But at the end of the year, they didn't renew my contract, so I ended up being a free agent and looking for other opportunities. So my agent, who actually grew up training in Brazil and had a friend who helped him train at Corinthians, said, you know, would you be interested in going down to Brazil and trying it out? And for me, it was an easy choice given the influence that Brazil was having on the world. And I said, sure. So that brought me to Santo André. And so Santo André at the time, they were in the 2nd division of the Brazilian Championship. And while I was there, they got promoted to the 1st division, which was amazing. But for me, it was a very intense experience. We trained twice a day across 3 different fields across Brazil. So we would wake up in the morning about 9 o'clock, get on a bus, about a half-hour ride to training from 10 to 12, come back, have some lunch, and then your afternoon session was from about 3 to 5. So that was our schedule, regimented week to week, and just, you know, over time there were games and things like that on the weekends as well. So coaches and trainers. So the guy on the left is a guy, Neri, who was one of the I guess one of the younger coaches on the team. He was kind of responsible for looking out for me, making sure that as coaches went over drills and stuff like that, I kind of knew what was going on, considering I didn't really know the language very well. So he was very big in terms of just being patient with me when I was trying to talk to teammates and really understand what was going on, get instructions from the coach, things like that. The guy on the right, Jonathan, was the head trainer. And also a huge Boston Celtics fan, which was very fun to kind of talk to him about basketball and just all the American influences and things like that. I think one of the really good advantages that I had was that in knowing American culture, there were definitely a lot of guys on the team and just players, coaches who wanted to hear more about American culture and the things that we do and the very funny things that I guess go on. So. I put this slide up because I had some musical influences during my trip. One was Amy Winehouse, who this album came out around the time that I was in Brazil. Maybe it was a year before, but I listened to this album probably every day the whole time that I was there. It was just a really relaxing album. It's just every time I see this album, I always think of Brazil just because I listen to it every night to go to sleep. I listen to it before games. It was just always there. The Eric Clapton picture is a little bit more meaningful. So my 3rd day in Brazil, around that, sometime in that first week, I walked by a bookstore and basically just in trying to learn the language and trying to figure everything out, I just decided, you know, maybe I should just buy a book and get a dictionary and just kind of go through it every night. So spent, bought an Eric Clapton biography of all people, and just kind of went through it every night, trying to learn the language and read through it. So youth players were also very influential. So I lived right near the campus or right near the field. And a lot of the youth players, the way it's set up in Brazil and in a lot of other countries is the players live together in bunks or in dorms basically near the stadium. No different here. So I got to spend a lot of time talking to the youth players and hearing about their dreams and aspirations and things like that. And they definitely had a big influence on me just because I learned about the professionalism of the game, how these guys really at 12 years old, they're thinking about being professionals and going to Europe, and that's really their biggest care. And if it's not working out, they will just head out and leave, and another person will be right there to take their place. So very cutthroat mentality that I kind of learned about. These guys are here all day, basically working out twice a day and going to school for a few hours at night if they feel like it, I guess. So that was another big part for me as well. So, as I mentioned, after the season, they got promoted to the first division, more money, better players, and that was the end of me in Brazil. But I really kind of learned a few things, and when I was in Brazil, I actually talked to my friend in New York who worked at a hedge fund at the time, and I was like, hey, what's going on? How's everything going? And he basically said that the financial world was on fire. And that was pretty much the time that I stopped playing soccer, around 2008. And so my kind of backup plan of working in finance and getting a job on Wall Street if things didn't work out in soccer kind of fell apart with just the financial crisis. So ended up getting a job at Kforce, which was a recruiting and staffing firm for finance. So ended up doing that and recruiting for jobs that did not really exist at the time. So it was a very tough job, and at this point I was almost out on soccer. I didn't enjoy it, didn't watch it, didn't follow it, no nothing. Just I was so kind of heartbroken by just the way everything had turned out that I decided to just step away for a year. It kind of started to come back a little bit, and one of the reasons why is I thought about those youth players and how passionate they all were about the game in Brazil, but how few of them were actually going to make it. And when I really thought about that and put it into perspective, I started thinking about ways that you can kind of reframe your passion, and even though it didn't necessarily work out the way you wanted it to, are there other ways that you can have an influence or maybe even have a bigger impact than you would have as a player? So with that said, after about a year, maybe one of the toughest years of my life, I quit my job in finance and picked up an internship at MLS for a whopping $500 a month before taxes, and supplemented that job by working at a very small soccer store on the Upper West Side of New York City. And that was really where the passion started to come back. And just by kind of being in that situation and going through those hardships, or the financial hardships especially, but still wanting to be there and saying that this was still better than my financial job, was huge for me. So that's when things kind of started to turn around, and over the next few years, it was a lot more of that. So these are most of, maybe not all of my jobs in New York over the next 3.5 years. But essentially, I never had less than 3 jobs at one time, the rest of my time in New York. And they were all small, or some of them were small. I mean, they were full-time things. But so I worked with NBC on their Olympic coverage here for soccer in 2012, coached a team of high school players, which was a really rewarding experience. Football partnerships, I started a networking group just to kind of learn more and find more soccer professionals. And then I started writing. So I wrote for Forbes about the business of soccer, and I also wrote an article in the New York Times about my experience in Brazil. And so all of those things really led to where I am now. So I write with ESPN right now, focusing on European soccer. And basically I am using that job and using my business school experience to try and transition into making that big impact and really kind of taking my passion for the game to the next level. So just some lessons learned. Take time to understand your passion. For me, I played soccer and it was really my dream to be a professional soccer player, but once I finished, I had to really understand why that was and what it was about soccer that I really enjoyed. And I found out that it was really the fact that the game can bring so many people together and that it's so universal around the world. And once I kind of realized that, that was really my biggest motivation for doing a program like the one I'm doing, where we get to kind of travel all over the world. Have a positive attitude in new surroundings. The biggest thing I had, or the only thing I had when I went to Brazil, was just my enthusiasm. I didn't know the language, I didn't know anyone, so just having a smile on my face and just being happy about being there every day was probably the biggest thing for getting people to kind of endear to me and talk to me a lot more. So get involved in as many activities as you can handle. As you saw, I tried to do as many things as I could just to try to get to a certain stability point. Again, just in my passion. Trust your instincts. It was not easy to leave that financial job, but it was definitely the right move. And you know, I had to trust that in the long run it would work out. And develop and maintain a strong support system. Obviously, that's true with whatever passion you're trying to find. It's so important that you have people who will support you and always really kind of love you no matter whether you succeed or fail, and always see that there are other ways that you can pivot out and still fulfill your passion in a lot of ways. So that's pretty much it. So.
Can I ask, three quick questions. What is your position on the team?
Oh, right.
Do you play for the LBS football team? And what is the best or most important goal you've ever scored? Can you talk us through it?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's good. So I was a forward, goal scorer. I do not play for the LBS team yet. I will be moving here in July, and will join the team, yes.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
And my most important goal will be that first goal that I scored. Yeah, I mean, there were some great goals. One goal that always stands out to me is, so my freshman year of college was the year of September 11th. So we actually had a game 2 days after September 11, and it was just a really emotional night. My school, Princeton, is in New Jersey, which is about an hour train ride from New York. And so we won that game 1-0. I scored that goal, and that was definitely the most memorable goal for me, just because of everything that was going on at the time and just kind of, you know, how it was. So, yeah.
Thank you.
When you were playing in Brazil, did you realise that if you were going to get promoted, that your position in the team might be a threat? Did you ever feel that there was like negative influences on your playing career, like things that demotivated you? If so, like what were the things that demotivated you on the pitch?
So demotivate, like, as in.
I want Villa players to play their best, but they never play their best because they look demotivated.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's very, like, I like to try and get under the skin of the player. So how did that affect you?
Well, the success of the team was great for me. I mean, I enjoyed I felt good for my teammates, and I also understood that getting to that first team level in Brazil may have been a little bit of kind of a long shot in terms of contracts, visas, things like that. So really, even if I was kind of farther away from the first team, I understood that it was an opportunity to use to maybe come back to MLS and say, I've got this experience playing in Brazil and I can use that kind of going forward. So there wasn't much of a demotivating factor. I will say that in Brazil, though, the culture, and I'm sure it's like this in Europe too, like the way they practice is they'll focus on the first team throughout most of training, basically. And a lot of the reserves will just kind of sit on the side and do some skills or just not really do too much. So it does get a little bit demotivating if you're trying to break into that group because you don't get too many opportunities. And when you do in training, it's just, here's 10 minutes. You better impress better than the guy who's already been there and has the job. So yeah, that can be a little tough, definitely.
We have time for one more question. Did you want to ask something in the back?
Yeah, I'm gonna shot that. I'm Brazilian, and I was just wondering. I mean, in the end, it's not that we do not like gringos that much, but no, especially when you talk on the low income. Yeah,
Coming playing football in Brazil.
when you are in the low income side of the country, they're not that educated, and then they see this foreign person coming into the team and they say, what the hell, like he doesn't even speak our language. How can he have this position and I do not get a shot? So did you feel this bad reception when you joined the team, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, I did feel a little bit of that from some players. I also felt from other players, though, that Brazilians are also very confident in their ability. So I think there were a good amount of players also, probably the same amount, who felt that I wasn't as much of a threat to taking their position. So yeah, it was interesting. Like I think for the most part, I was well received and it was fine. I think the players that didn't really accept me, like I said before, like if you weren't getting along and if you weren't progressing pretty quickly, you would just move on to the next club, and that would be it. So I was amazed at how quickly, if the coach didn't like you or if you just, fell out of favor for a few weeks, like you would just, be on your way and pack your bags and just move on. And that's how it was, because at least for me, I felt like there was definitely a culture of like, I'm trying to get to the next big step, which for a lot of those guys felt like Europe. But if not, it was just, let me get to the biggest club in Brazil I can. And the club almost didn't matter as much at that stage. So yeah.